Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here and to talk about autism research. Okay, if I can get my thing to move forward. Okay, there we go. All right, so um, I wrote a blog recently, and I was thinking about like what do people think about when they hear the word research? And so I Googled it, and when you do that, it comes up with a lot of images like white lab coats, test tubes and beakers, magnifying glasses, microscopes, question marks, and like people huddled together in deep thought. And I thought, these kinds of images, I think, oftentimes make research feel kind of mystifying or intimidating, mysterious, maybe even a little bit scary. But clinical research really needs people to participate. And so I started thinking maybe images like these might make people not want to participate in research. And so part of my goal is to hopefully help people to think about research um, as a little bit more accessible and maybe not as intimidating or as potentially scary. So I think research can oftentimes look like this. At least this is what a lot of my research looks like. Um, it can be, comfortable and on your own time, and sometimes connect you with other people. Sometimes provide therapy or be sort of cathartic. Um, and oftentimes it's hopefully a situation where you're both contributing to something but getting something out of it as well. So my goal for today is really, like I said before, hopefully to talk about some things that help make research be a little bit more accessible and tangible for folks, particularly those who may not have participated in any research before. So our basic objectives are to provide a basic overview of the research process, to review types of clinical research and emphasize why representation in research is particularly important. I'm going to share some information about how to identify research studies as well as to vet them and evaluate how good they might be for your family. And then also just identify what are some benefits of research for individuals and families. So, why do we do research? Well, research is one of the ways that we create knowledge, and we use that information to make decisions, to solve problems, to achieve our goals, and to navigate life more efficiently and effectively. I was writing something not long ago, and I posed the question, how does your doctor know what treatments to prescribe? And it's because of research, because we've done research where we've compared different treatments or different interventions, and we then we create knowledge about which ones work the best. And then that information is used to make evidence based practice guidelines so that your doctor is always putting forth what we know to be the most efficacious for you. So, how do researchers get their ideas? Well, there are lots of things that could influence how and what investigators choose to study. So, sometimes it could be influenced by clinical experiences. So, for example, a clinician may encounter a particular issue that they want to understand or resolve. Um, I have a colleague in Australia, she's a developmental pediatrician, and she became interested in researching the phenomenon of regression or skill loss in children because of a patient that she had. Um, this child came into clinic and there was a very compelling case for regression. And at the time, she didn't know much about it. She hadn't encountered any other patients with that situation. And she really didn't know what were the first line courses of action that she should take. So that really motivated her to want to understand more about that experience and that situation. Researchers also get their ideas from personal experiences. So these could be either positive or maybe negative events that offer them some direction about where do I want to go? What do I want to learn about this so that maybe I can make it better? And then also investigators may get their ideas through their educational training. So sometimes you may be in a class or in a course and you learn about a phenomenon of interest. I remember I'm a psychologist by training. I remember in high school, that was my very first exposure to psychology. And I was fascinated by learning about behavior and why people behave the way that they do and what motivates behavior. And so that has continued to be a really integral part of my line of research. Also, as part of educational or training programs, people work under the mentorship of a supervisor or a teacher. And so that person can sometimes already have a program of research. And so getting training in their lab or under their mentorship can really influence the direction of research that that individual pursues. So once you have an idea, what does an investigator do with it? Well, the first thing is that they're going to want to hone their research questions. So you need to be very specific and identify what exactly do you want to know. Once you know what you're interested in or what your topic is, you need to learn everything that is already known about your topic and then what is not known. So what this is going to entail is a really deep dive into the existing literature so that you can understand where we are in our understanding and our knowledge of this topic. There's no sense in doing a study when that study's already been done maybe multiple times and you're not adding anything new to our knowledge. The next thing you're going to want to do once you have a good handle on what's known and what's not known, then you want to generate a hypothesis or a prediction about what you think the answers are going to be to your research questions. And then those research questions are really going to dictate the design of your proposal that you will use to help answer those questions. And I feel like this is really the key step, your make or break moment, because the validity of your results are going to rely on the quality of your methodological approach. So that's why it's really important that you choose methods, you choose a study design that's really appropriate to answer your questions. Okay, so once you've developed your proposal, you're not ready to go yet. You don't have the green light yet. All of our research is reviewed by what we call the IRB, or an institutional review board. And this is essentially a committee that reviews research proposals that include humans. So there's a separate committee that reviews proposals that focuses on animal research. But basically, the purpose of the IRB is to ensure that research studies are ethical and that they protect individuals' rights and well-being. So this is a really good thing. Even though it's a hurdle for researchers to get over, it's a really important step because a lot of the times the IRB committees will identify sort of gaps and like, hey, you didn't really explain this very well, or we need to make sure that we clearly understand X, Y, and Z so that you're communicating accurately to potential participants what's going to be involved in your project. So the items, there are 8 key things that I've listed here in this red box. These are going to be the key features that the IRB is going to be looking at when they're reviewing a proposal. So firstly, they're going to be looking at the risks and benefits and the risk and benefit ratio. So, are there any potential harms? What are the possible benefits that families could or individuals could glean from this research? And it's not just weighing the risks and benefits for that individual who may be participating, but also benefits to society. They're also going to take a look at how you plan on going about identifying potential participants and how you go about recruiting them into your study. So they want to make sure that you're using approaches that are ethical and that you're not doing anything that would otherwise be inappropriate. Probably the most important thing that they like to focus on is what we call informed consent. So a lot of the times this is basically, if folks who participated in research before, you've probably signed what we call an informed consent document. This is basically an explanation of the research, what is going to be entailed in the project, what you're going to be asked to do. It outlines risks and benefits, how your information is going to be protected and secured, how your information or the data that you share is going to be used. It includes contact information for the investigators. So it's basically kind of everything that an individual would need to know in order to fully understand kind of what they're getting into and what they're agreeing to be involved with is in this document. And so this is something that's reviewed with the individual, with a member of the study team. And if the person would like to join the study, then they sign the informed consent document. So the IRB is also going to take a look at whether or not you're doing research with what they call vulnerable groups requiring special protection. So this could include children, individuals with intellectual disability, prisoners, employees of maybe the organization that you are working for. They just want to make sure that you're taking the steps necessary to protect those groups and that they are fully informed or their representatives are informed. The IRB also wants to ensure privacy and confidentiality, so they'll make sure that you've outlined steps to keep participants' personal health information private, that you're securing it, and that only people who are involved with the research project have access to that information. They're going to look at your research design and methods just to make sure that they are ethical. They will ask about data storage and security to make sure that the data that you're collecting either electronically or physically is locked up and stored, and that, again, only the people who are involved in the research are going to have access to that information. And then they're also going to take a look at ethical considerations. So, for example, making sure that the way that you engage families in research is not, you're not trying to, oh, I'm blanking on the word right now, but basically you're not trying to get them to participate and entice them with like incentives that are kind of mismatched with what families are being asked to do. Okay, so I want to review briefly types of medical research. So there are three main types of medical research that are kind of related with each other. So it's basic, translational, and clinical. So basic research is focused on the building blocks of nature to understand what is happening at a fundamental level. So this is going to be the kind of research that looks at molecules or cells or DNA to really understand the basic things going on. Translational research is focused on developing a solution to problems that are identified through basic research. So, for example, this would be where we see medications being developed or therapies or interventions. And then clinical research is focused on assessing those solutions that are identified in translational research through clinical trials with human beings. So let me give you an example. Let's just pretend that we have a group of people who are sick and we want to understand why they're sick and what we can do about it. So maybe we learn through basic science that, oh, these people have a bacterial infection and we need to stop the bacteria from reproducing, and hopefully that will be a way to help them get better. So then we move to that translational step and then we say, okay, now we've got this medication that we think is going to stop the bacteria from being able to replicate. So we try out that medication in a group of people who are sick in our clinical trial, and maybe half of the people get the medication, the other half don't. And we see that of the group who got the medication, say 80% of them get better immediately. And maybe out of the group that didn't get it, maybe only 10% get better. And so we see that, hey, there's pretty good evidence that the people who got the medication, they got better. So there's pretty good evidence that this medication works. Well, you see that the translational piece here, it has arrows going both ways. And that's because this is kind of an iterative process. So in a situation like our example, only 80% of the people who got the medication got better. So we may want to kind of go back to that translational research or even back to the basic research and understand, hey, what was it about the other 20% of the people who didn't respond to that medication? Why didn't they respond? And is there anything that we could do differently that might work better for them? So what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the presentation is really on this clinical piece. That's the work that I do, and I think that that's probably going to be the work that's when you get invited to participate in research, it's going to be clinical research. So there are two main categories of clinical research, qualitative and quantitative. So I'm going to talk about qualitative first. So qualitative research is used when we want to understand a phenomenon or a construct intensively. We want to take a deep dive into it. And we do that when there is little to nothing that is currently known about the thing that we're interested in. So qualitative research, we actually don't need large samples to do qualitative research well. So we typically see smaller samples in qualitative research. And essentially, this work generates a nice story through in-depth understanding of the phenomenon. So here are some examples of different qualitative designs. So we have a case study, interviews, and focus groups. So a case study is going to be an in-depth look at just a single individual. And sometimes this will happen in situations where maybe a clinician has a patient with a really unique presentation, or maybe a presentation that they've never seen before, or maybe a very rare condition. And so it could be a really nice way to take a very intensive look at the situation and then report about that so that other people might become aware of it. Oftentimes, this is how people learn that, hey, we didn't have the only case. We've identified some other people with the same similarities in this presentation, and then we can start to learn more about it. Another type of qualitative design are interviews. So interviews typically occur with just one individual and a member of the research team, or maybe it could be a couple. They've outlined an interview structure, so a set of questions that they want to ask to make sure that they ask everyone who they're interviewing the same set of questions. Although there is some flexibility in terms of allowing that conversation to go where it needs to go to really make sure that you're capturing all of the information that you want to know about that particular topic. And then we have focus groups, and they are similar to interviews, but they're done in a group setting. And this is so that you might have ideas that one person in the group shares be kind of reinforced maybe by other members of the group, or maybe something that someone says reminds another participant about something that they wanted to share, so that you're really making sure that you're getting all perspectives and getting rich information from folks. So the QR codes that are beneath each of these examples will take you to a published abstract of a paper that exemplifies that particular type of approach. So I hope you'll go and check that out. I've shamelessly included some of my own work in there. Okay, so the other broad category of clinical research is quantitative. And we use quantitative research to understand a phenomenon or a construct extensively. So qualitative was looking at it intensively, quantitative is extensively. And we do this when we know something about the phenomenon that we're interested in, but maybe we need to know more about it, or we want to take it in a little bit different direction. And quantitative research really relies on larger samples. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But essentially, quantitative research provides an understanding of how pervasive a phenomenon is, especially across different groups. So a few different types of quantitative designs that I've shared here. One is the survey. So this is all about questions. So survey research, it's probably the most common form of research. Probably most folks have been asked to participate in a survey before. This could either be filling out a questionnaire, maybe online or on paper, or having someone call you and say, hey, can I ask you some questions? Another type of quantitative design is observational. And this is just what it sounds like. It's the investigator is really observing what's happening in a situation. They're not intervening. They're not doing anything to make anything happen. They really want to understand how things are happening in the natural course of the situation. And then a third type of quantitative research is experimental. So this is where we would have our clinical trials, oftentimes in experimental research, the investigator is introducing something and they want to understand the effect of that something on an outcome. Um, it doesn't always have to be that the investigator is introducing something. Um, I'll give an example. So, for example, some of the research I do looks at parents' beliefs about causes of autism. And I look at it and I compare groups for parents who have said their child had developmental regression and then parents who said their child did not regress. And we look at are there differences in these groups about beliefs about causes of autism. And as before, the QR codes will take you to some examples of those types of research designs. Okay, so I mentioned in my last slide that quantitative research uses large samples, and I wanted to spend a minute to talk about why it's important for quantitative research to oftentimes have large and diverse samples. So I want to do that through an example. So let's pretend we're doing a research study and the investigator wants to know what is the most popular favorite color. So these three gentlemen off to the side, these are the three participants in the study, and two of them say that their favorite color is blue, and one of them says his favorite color is orange. And so the report that comes out says research shows that 2/3 of people report that their favorite color is blue. Well, there's a lot of problems with that because as you can tell, the woman off to the side, maybe she's read this report and she's saying, wait, what? My favorite color is green. And she's not heard anything about any other colors as part of this research. So the problem here is that the results from this research study, they're not very representative. That means they can't generalize to a broader group of people because we've had such a small similar sample of folks who are part of the research sample. So at the end of the day, small research samples that lack representation from all groups may not accurately reflect the experiences of the broader population. So large and diverse samples more accurately reflect the experiences of the broader population. And so representativeness is key to really ensuring that our research findings have the broadest application possible, and that we're able to then use that information to develop clinical products that are relevant to all. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit about how you can find out about research opportunities. So let's say you're excited, I've motivated you, you want to be a part of a research project. How can you find out where to go? So lots of different places, lots of options. So you can start out with your healthcare provider. Oftentimes, clinical sites will be involved in some studies. So you could ask if there are any research opportunities running through your clinic. You can also search the websites of local colleges and universities or medical centers or autism clinics. So I know that the Spark Clinical Site Network, a lot of those clinical sites have dedicated research web pages that you can go to, and they will advertise their actively enrolling studies. So that may be a good place for you to go, and especially identifying something that's local to you. Federally funded trials are required to be posted on a website called clinicaltrials.gov. And this will tell you, what studies are funded. They will give you a good description about the project and what participation entails and the contact information for who to contact if you want to learn more. There's also another website called researchmatch.org, and you can sign up to be a participant through this program. And essentially what it does is if there are research studies that would like to use researchmatch.org as a recruitment tool, then they will email you and say, hey, there's a research study that may be a good fit for you, and then you can decide if you want to learn more. Similarly, for families who are part of Spark, they will be notified about new research opportunities through Spark's Research Match program. And it works really similarly. Families will be notified about research opportunities that they may be eligible for, and then families can learn about the studies and choose if they want to participate or not. A lot of researchers now are recruiting for their research through social media platforms. So that could be another way for you to also look up different active research studies through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, um, X. So you could try that out. And then there's the Organization for Autism Research also has a really nice listing of active studies that are recruiting. And I will talk about them a little bit more in a second because I think they are a lovely resource. So, how do you know if a study is right for you and your family? So, I think there are a lot of things that you need to consider. One is the topic of interest. Is this something that matters to you? Is it something that maybe you would be able to benefit from by participating? You also need to consider the time requirements and the duration of study. So, for example, it's relatively easy to maybe participate in a 15-minute survey, but maybe harder to participate in a 15-month clinical trial. So you just want to make sure, what are the requirements of participation in terms of duration. Also, you may want to think about like the intrusiveness of a particular study. Some studies, like I said, like a questionnaire, that's pretty easy. That's not very intrusive, but something that involves, surgical procedures or blood draws, those might be considered more intrusive. I did a study for my master's program where I was interviewing families about the literacy opportunities that they were giving for their young children with developmental delays. And I was conducting in depth interviews in their homes and asking them to take me on tours of their homes. So I was in their home for like 3 or 4 hours. So that's pretty intrusive, and not everybody's that comfortable sharing that information. So um, as we talked about before, we also need to think about the risks versus the benefits. How much risk are you willing to take for what degree of benefit? And then finally, privacy concerns. You want to think about that because sometimes research is asking for a lot of information, delicate information or personal information about you or other family members. And so you just want to make sure that you're comfortable sharing that. Okay, so I mentioned briefly the Organization for Autism Research, and I wanted to highlight some tools and resources through this group that I think are really important. First is their navigating research section. So this is on the Families tab, Intro to Autism, Navigating Research. And when you go to that site, this is what pops up. And you can see they have like these 5 different icons that will lead you to looking more into different types of research, how to find research, reading research papers like journal articles and how to kind of dissect that, participating in research, and then identifying high quality research. So I think for folks who are after this talk are interested in really taking a much deeper dive into these kinds of topics, this is a really great place to start. Um, Going back to their families tab again, I want to point out also under resources, their guidebooks. So I think that this is a really helpful place for families to go to get some high quality resources and information that's free. So when you go to their guidebook section, this is what pops up. You can see the first guidebook there is A Parent's Guide to Research. This is a really wonderful publication that just kind of walks families through the steps of what is research, what kinds of research is out there, how do I vet a study, how do I know if that's right for me. But they also have several other really great guidebooks that I think families should be aware of. So the examples that you see here, A Guide for Transition to Adulthood, Navigating the Special Education System. Go here, there's several different guidebooks here, and they are available for download as PDFs or Kindle in English or Spanish. And I believe that the first 2 downloads are free. And then if you want to download more after that, I think there is a fee, but definitely something to check out. Okay, so why is research important to families? Well, I think first and foremost, I think about research as being a resource for families. So, research can offer connections, information, opportunities, and education. So, I want to talk about each of those things in a little bit more detail. So, research brings connections. So, research is a way that you can get families connected with organizations or supportive programs or other professionals that may be able to help them that they may not have ever learned about before. I often have families who've participated in our research contact me afterwards, maybe sometimes years down the road, and they're just looking for help and they don't know where else to go. And so I'm able to leverage my contacts, my clinical partners, and my network to find resources and information for them. So, for example, sometimes families have moved out of state and they don't know how to connect with new autism professionals in that area or maybe families, their child has grown and now they have some new issues or concerns and they don't know where to go or who to ask about that. So I can help point them in the right direction at least. I think research too can help you connect better with your child and family. So a lot of the times research projects are asking a lot of questions. You're making a lot of observations about your child or your other family members. And just by virtue of participating and sharing that information, I think can help families get a more in-depth understanding of their child or their family members, and that can help you feel more connected with them. And then finally, I think that research can sometimes kind of help build a community of other families that you can identify with. And I've included this information about the HADS Foundation and their conference here. So I've been doing some research with my colleagues on HADS syndrome. It is a relatively new genetic syndrome. And when it was first identified, there were only a handful of people that were known to have this. Um, the HADS Foundation was initiated by some of these families, and they started hosting annual meetings in the summer. And I've been involved for the past 3 years, and each year over the last few years, I've seen this annual meeting grow. And people from all over the world with HADS are now coming to this meeting, and they are finding it extremely rewarding to be able to connect with other families who have experienced some of the same challenges that they have, whose children have some of the same characteristics. They're able to learn from one another, rely on each other, and just share resources. So this has been something very valuable for them. Okay, research can also bring information. So a lot of times through studies, you can learn clinical information that could inform your child's medical care, treatments, interventions, or educational supports. You can also learn like new information, like what is cutting edge information that's happening in autism research, and get this through free resources. So I think the Spark webinars are a perfect example. These webinars are hosted monthly. They're freely available, so people don't have to participate in Spark to be able to access them. But you may never have learned about them if you hadn't participated in research or hadn't talked with a researcher, who kind of pointed you in that direction. Likewise, the Simons Foundation puts out this newsletter called the Transmitter. It's a really wonderful place to go and get high quality, accurate, kind of cutting edge information. And again, I wouldn't have known about it had I not been connected with the research community. So I feel like these are just some examples about how you can get connected with other information that may be really valuable. Also, I think research can bring other opportunities. So maybe it's opportunities to participate in additional research projects that may be particularly meaningful or valuable to you or your family. So I already talked about Spark's Research Match program. I think that that's an excellent way to stay in the know. Also, my lab has a program that we call Research Pals. This stands for Participant Awareness List. And essentially, it's just a registry that people can join so that they can be on a list to be notified about new opportunities as they come about. I think that oftentimes families tell us that They feel satisfied by participating in research and contributing to science in ways that help those that are following in their footsteps. So, oftentimes when we have conducted a study, we'll ask families for feedback. Like we do more we do more research with them. So we give them a survey and say, how did we do? How was your experience in this study? And oftentimes we'll ask them like, what motivated you to join this study, to participate? And the most common answer that we see is that families just wanted to pay it forward. They just wanted to um, give back so that hopefully by sharing their stories and their information, that it makes the journey a little bit easier for those following in their footsteps. And then finally, through research, you may have an opportunity to earn some incentives. So oftentimes this could be earning a little money, maybe some gift cards, volunteer hours. My daughter has a requirement at school that she has to have 10 volunteer hours every year. So she's going to be participating in a study this fall where she can get 6 of those volunteer hours knocked out. Um, Also, I like to think about research as being educational, particularly for the autism community. So when children receive an autism diagnosis, their parents must educate themselves about the different therapy and intervention options available because they're ultimately the ones that are going to have to sort through this information and choose which ones make sense for their child and their family. And research can be a really valuable part of that education. So parents may find it helpful to learn more about how research works so that they can evaluate the evidence behind those different treatments and interventions and pick the ones that are best for them. And then also to know how to assess whether a study is a good fit for them. And again, I think that the Parent's Guide to Research for the Organization for Autism Research is a great way that they can get that information and support. And finally, the main reason why I tell families that I think it would be valuable for them to get involved in research is because they have the power to shape autism knowledge. So when you participate in autism research, you can influence what we know about autism by sharing your voice and your experience or your family's experience. So you can add to our knowledge of autism so that our understanding is more accurate. And I want to take this back. So this is kind of brings home that point that we talked about earlier about the importance of large and diverse samples. So this woman off to the side over here, whose favorite color is green, she is not seeing herself reflected in those results because she wasn't a part of it. We didn't have a large and diverse sample as part of this little research study on favorite colors. And so the results are not going to apply to her, and she's not going to see herself in that. So again, when you help to get involved, when you share your voice, then you are helping to contribute that piece, your experience, to our knowledge, so that our research is more representative of the broader autism community. So this is actually a slide that I share a lot when I do research talks within my hospital setting. And I really am trying to like promote research and clinical partnerships with my clinical collaborators to please share research opportunities in clinic. So when I first started this presentation, I said, how does your doctor know what treatments or interventions to prescribe? And it's because of research, because research that improves health outcomes is part of good clinical care. And the good clinical care of tomorrow will rely on the continued research we do today. So now is the time for you to share your voice and contribute to autism research so that your voice is a part of the solutions and the knowledge that we are able to use to apply tomorrow. Where's my cursor? Okay, so I'm wrapping up and I want to just emphasize some key things that I want you to take away. So research helps us answer questions by creating knowledge. Research studies are scrutinized by ethical review boards before they ever get to you. Study designs are chosen based on the types of questions being answered, and those questions are very important to dictating those designs. Sample size and representation is absolutely key to generalizability. So we want to ensure large samples and diverse samples. Sharing your voice is important to shaping what we know about autism. And then research can be a valuable resource for families. And there are tools out there that can help families learn about research opportunities and navigate those opportunities so that they can choose the ones that are the best fit for them. All right, so that is the end of my talk, but I'm sharing information about my lab here, our Facebook page, as well as how you can contact me or a member of my team. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kochel. And we had, quite a few questions come in, and we have a nice amount of time here for a Q&A. So I think let's just get to it. So you spoke a lot about and presented a lot of different ways for people to, find research opportunities, or even for the opportunities to come to them, if they're participating in something like Spark. But in terms of diversifying, cohorts in research, so for instance, how could somebody who's maybe on one of these, subscribe to one of these research match programs, but perhaps a family that's affected by severe autism, are there research opportunities for these families? And what would that participation maybe look like, if you can speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really just about going and seeing what's there. I would think that I haven't personally like looked specifically for that topic, but I would think yes. In fact, I was really impressed when I went to the Organization for Autism Research, their site where they list all of the active studies that are looking for participants. I was really impressed with the quantity and the breadth of research that was available there. I think you just have to go and take a look and see, what's out there. And I'm quite sure that there are research studies that are really looking for families who have, who their family members have severe autism, and that maybe it needs to be more of like a family experience, a participation experience.
And I guess to that end, talking, maybe that's, perhaps not your research focus, but just thinking about autism research broadly, is there a sense that there are gaps in this research? Specifically, what are some areas that maybe have larger gaps that people, whether they're interested in these areas, they might not realize there's research about them, or some up and coming research topics that are being looked at now by researchers?
Yeah, so I think I feel like treatments and therapies is always something that the research community is looking for more of, like more ways to support people, whether it's, early intervention for very young children, or, interventions to help adults, with employment and how to be successful in gaining and retaining employment. So I think that that's always something that we're looking for more intervention research, and that funding agencies are looking to support that. Um, I feel like too, like I feel like we're always looking for biomarkers for things. And so I see a lot of that. Um, and in terms of, I'm trying to think about other gaps. I feel like, well, I think, I don't know. I think you can just go and look if there are particular topics, maybe that people are interested in. Um, I think that you could go to some of these places that I've mentioned and maybe just kind of see, has this been covered? Has this been addressed? Or even doing a Google search to try to find who are the researchers out there who are interested in this topic. That may be a good way to see, like, is this, maybe I'm interested in it, but I don't know if other people are, or who's doing work in that area. And it could be a way to identify folks who are engaged in that type of work.
Google is definitely our friend with
I know.
many things, but
I hesitate to recommend just Google anything, but like I know that I will do it if I want to know, like, who's looking at this, or I will in doing, like I talked about, doing that lit review, or doing that background on what do we already know about this topic. Then I can identify people who've already done that kind of work and ask, what are you doing now? Where do you see what do you see as the next step, or where do you think this is going? Where is your lab taking this? And so you can kind of get a feel for what direction things are moving in.
Yeah, it's definitely always a great place to start for sure. Um, so you mentioned the OAR website again in your just in that reply, and that got me thinking as well. And this question came in about this. You mentioned there were things people could download both in English and Spanish, and so particularly thinking about the Spanish piece of this,
Mhm.
um, are there many opportunities at present for Spanish or non-English speakers, or where are there different places that maybe these folks should look?
I think that that's a great question, and I will say, I don't think that there don't seem to be as many opportunities
Mhm.
in other languages as there are for people who are fluent in English. Um, I think that that's getting better though. So I know that there is an effort to make sure that research is available in more languages. We've done some studies in my lab that are just for Spanish speaking families, but through platforms like Research Match, for example, they will ask you about, are you looking for people who in certain demographics, or who speak certain languages? Is your consent form available in those languages? That's another kind of key piece is when you're doing research like this, you need to make sure that everything that you're doing is available in those other languages. And sometimes we just don't have the tools translated in the variety of languages that we would need in order to make that work. But I do think that there are places that you can go and find out, like, where there are available opportunities for people who non-English speakers.
And I know just from working with your Spark clinical site and working for Spark, I know this is something that we are really working towards. Our
Yeah.
DEI initiatives are really at the forefront of what we're doing. But as a researcher, do you see, largely across the board, researchers striving to make their studies more accessible? I know there are some challenges, of course, with language barriers perhaps being one, but is that somewhere you see the research field going?
I do. I feel like we do see more people trying to open things up and to be more inclusive, and trying to include people who maybe are linguistically diverse. Um, for example, like you mentioned, our site is going to be starting to work on some strategies to increase representation in Spark from the Asian American and Pacific Islander families. And one of the things that we know that they've shared with us is that it's been difficult for them to participate in research because of the language barriers. And so we want to learn from them what are barriers and facilitators to their participation in research, but we're going to translate the surveys. So we will make sure that we have people on our team that are fluent in those languages, and that we have a process to make sure that the questions that we want to ask them are appropriately translated so that we can understand their perspectives. And hopefully we'll be able to tap into a group that maybe wants to share their information, but just hasn't had an opportunity because of that.
Great. Yeah, I know we're all very excited to be expanding in this way through Spark, and so we thank you and your site for helping us do that. While we're talking about your site specifically and research specific to you all, can you talk a little bit more about the Research Pals program and who is eligible for that? Is this families with dependents? Can independent adults fill out the form to participate as well?
Absolutely. So it really is just kind of a registry of people. We just ask you to fill out an online form. It takes a couple minutes to complete. The form is available in English and in Spanish. And basically, it just allows us to keep a record of people who say, "Hey, I'm interested in just learning about when there are new research opportunities. Contact me and let me know." So that's what we do. If we get, a lot of times we have colleagues who will email me and say, hey, can you just help spread the news about our new study? And so oftentimes we'll post it on our Facebook page, we'll share it with our research pals list. And of course, it doesn't obligate anybody to participate in any study. It's just a way for you to kind of be in the know.
Great. Thank you. We got a question about just accessing some of the QR codes and the studies that you shared. Are those publicly available? Are there any paywalls? Will people be able to the earlier QR codes when you were going through the qualitative and
Right.
quantitative research to clarify?
So they will take you to, it's not going to take, I think there's only one that it takes you to the actual article because it's freely available, but they will take you to just at least the abstract. So I was hoping that just to
Okay.
get people kind of a bite-sized description of like, this is what, for example, this is what a case report might look like. And there's a really nice abstract for that example. And if somebody's really interested in accessing the full text for any of those, I'm happy to help try to facilitate that. But yeah, they're really just intended to be examples of papers that the abstract is like a brief summary of what's all in the entire paper. So that's why we just made available those. Oftentimes, organizations will have to subscribe to those journals in order for people to get full access to them. So that can be a little more challenging.
Great, thank you. I know some people were asking. I think we might have had some eager folks that were already
Yeah,
scanning the QR codes while you're talking, which is exciting that people are already so interested in jumping in already.
yes, absolutely. And if any of the QR codes, for whatever reason, I'll share the slides. I will double check them
Mhm.
that they still are working. But if they're not, anybody can email me and we can connect you with some good examples.
Great, and thank you so much for making yourself available via email. I see your emails on the slide here, and as you said, these will be available alongside the recording for folks. So for everyone on the call, there's something to keep in mind if you don't have your question at the ready right now. Uh, another thing, we know Spark does we collect behavioral, medical, as well as genetic information from folks if they're interested in sharing that, and that helps us align them with other research opportunities potentially. In addition to genetic research that's happening, are you aware of, or perhaps participating yourself, or facilitating rather yourself, any research being done on not only genetic causes of autism, but maybe like the environmental causes of autism? I know that's something people are
Mm.
interested in.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I feel like when I've talked about that, I always say, where we are with our understanding of like environmental influences, etiological influences on autism. We're really kind of in our infancy with that compared to what we know about genetic causes for autism. I personally am not involved in any research right now looking at environmental factors, but I will say that there are groups in California who do really nice work, a lot of epidemiological work looking at specific environmental factors. So at UC Davis and the Mind Institute out there, also that there's a Kaiser Permanente group that they're taking some really nice deep dives into particular environmental factors. So those would be some groups that I would check out if you're interested in learning more about what's being done to investigate environmental factors.
Great. And probably maybe one or two more questions we have time for. Kind of similar along the lines of, perhaps it might have been the first question I asked. Are there opportunities for nonverbal autistic individuals? And what might those look like?
Absolutely. So yes, so I think that there are, and sometimes a lot, some of the tests that we do, for example, like a lot of the work that I do does sort of like a rich characterization of people that are participating in the study. And we have to make sure that we design batteries that can really accurately kind of capture what their skills are. And so for nonverbal individuals, we need to make sure that we're choosing tools that allow them to participate. So Yes, I think that a lot of studies can accommodate, to whatever the skill level is. So right now, like with the HADS example right now, we have some, it's a broad spectrum of abilities, and we have some kids that are, that they're nonverbal, and maybe they can't ambulate very well. And so we have a specific battery that still allows us to gather rich information from them, but that's just different in a way that's different from our participants who are verbal and are speaking, in like fluent, complex sentences and things like that. So there's definitely ways for them to participate. And I think you just have to be kind of looking out for like, hey, what is that eligibility criteria? And then
Mhm.
what is involved with that participation once you kind of realize, yes, I am eligible for that.
Great. And I think I'll squeeze in one last question I think might sort of round out
Yeah.
this talk nicely. So again, we talked a lot about where people can go to find research opportunities that are already, out there or recruiting. But is there any way for people, whether it's families affected by autism, or maybe independent adults that are interested in research, are there
Mhm.
ways for them to share, hey, this is something I'd be interested in? Is there research on this topic? Are researchers listening to autistic individuals them when they are creating their research studies?
Yes, so I would say we're seeing increasingly more that we have these like advisory boards or kind of panels where ideally at the outset, when you're first designing your project, that you're getting that input from those people who are going to be most directly involved with or affected by the kind of work that you're doing. So we've had advisory boards that tell us like, we think you should focus on X, Y, and Z, or we think that this is the best way to outreach to this particular group. So they really like help shape um, the research from the beginning. And then also, just kind of being a touch point as you start like actually conducting that study and saying, hey, we've encountered maybe this problem. Do you have any suggestions? Or hey, here are the results. Let's talk about them with you and get your input on what that really means. And then what direction you think we should go in next, given these findings. So I would definitely, if folks are interested in that, I would definitely try to see if you can search out opportunities to be a part, like I don't know what they're called. I'm blanking on kind of what they're called, but um, a, like a community. Oh, I just was reviewing grants for DoD, and they have like someone from the community who represents like
Hmm.
a parent or a self advocate, like as part of the review committee. So there definitely are, I think, opportunities like that, or to be a part of an advisory board. Maybe look up things like that.